Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, um, today we are with a great researcher in Peru, Mr. Brien Foerster, and he has been researching about long skulls and a number of other monumental places in Peru, Machu Picchu and Cusco and Bolivia also, and he has a lot of new discoveries that we would Skype him in the conference if it's possible from Bolivia. But today, for being safe, we are videoing 30 minutes of his talk about long skulls. He is currently in Cusco, Peru. Hello, Brian. How are you?
I am great. How about you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to Alchemy event and Cosmic Activation prior to the event. And our audience are on Facebook. They have been very much liking what you're doing, and you're very popular on Facebook and everywhere else. And we love your work. And go ahead and tell us more about your work yourself, whatever you like to bring up.
Well, if I may, I'd like to go through a few slides and then we can continue the conversation. But mainly what I am looking at is the relationship between the elongated skulls of Peru, though they were a worldwide phenomenon. It's in Peru that the largest skulls have been found, such as the one you see on the slide.
That's right.
And this one shows you a close-up of the forehead. This skull, this person died about 2,000 years ago, and in fact this race of people or beings died 2,000 years ago. And they were located on the coast of Peru, but there's a good likelihood that they were also related to people of the highlands, including possibly the Inca.
Are you talking about Paracas or Nazca lines or where? Costa Peru
Yes,
where?
it's Paracas, and the thing about exactly just south of Lima by about 4 hours is where Paracas is.
Okay. Okay.
And this shows you two individuals, both from the Paracas culture. And this slide shows you the difference between, on the right you'll see a Paracas person, on the left you'll see a normal-looking person, and in the middle is an example of cranial deformation. That's where tribal people or ancient people deliberately altered the shape of the skull. But the one on the right isn't like that.
I see.
It's, yeah, and like I said, it was a global phenomenon, but from this slide you can see that there are some very large skulls. Every single one of the large ones in this collection here are from Paracas.
How much extra brain we talking about? Were they twice as big as our heads?
No, their cranial volume was probably at least 25% larger. In some cases, maybe up to 40%, but I think allegations that they were 2 or 3 times are not substantiated, at least not from what I've seen.
And same kind of skull were in Egypt and everywhere else, correct?
Somewhat, but the difference between Egypt and what we're referring to is the Amarna period, when King Akhenaten, the pharaoh, Nefertiti, and Tutankhamun lived. As you can see from this artistic depiction, their skulls are different from the Paracas. They're more laterally extended, whereas the Paracas are more vertical.
Now, this formation is not what currently in Africa they or in Peru they Incas they wrap the head of the baby. This is not what is done by wrapping at the age of early age, is it?
No, the up until the 20th century, and even late in the 20th century. This, for example, is what Tutankhamun probably looked like in real life. He wasn't overly deformed in terms of his skull, but in Africa, for example, here, you see an example of, that's probably from the 19th century, and this is from the 20th century. You see, that is cranial deformation by the Mengbutu people of the Congo.
I see. And this is a different.
And that as well.
Okay. This is a different formation.
And this is actually in Melanesia, near Vanuatu.
What was the reason they would do that?
Yeah, this is deliberate. Exactly. Whereas the Paracas, only some of them though. Some of them look natural. Well, actually, it was a global phenomenon, and all of the cultures that David Hatcher-Childress and I studied for our book, basically the people, or the descendants of the people, said that they're noble children. It was only done to the royal families, and it was said that the children were more intelligent, were more attractive, and most importantly, that their ancestors naturally looked this way. So that's why they tried to artificially copy the ancestors.
Interesting. It was sign of nobility. Okay.
Exactly. Only the nobility.
And
this, for example, is Malta.
And by 25% having more brain, what kind of scientifically, what kind of advantages would they have to us?
Well, that's a great question. Probably the naturally elongated skulls, we're thinking, most likely had much more expanded psychic power than we have. That would possibly be the reason for having a larger brain, but we're also relating the fact that where you find the elongated skulls, this one, for example, was found in Russia. It was almost, it died 2,000 years ago. But where we find the elongated skulls, we also find megalithic stone structures, especially in Peru.
Well, that means that.
Sorry, but this, for example, is from Hungary.
Hungary. Did you say Hungary?
Yeah. And in Austria, Hungary and Austria and Germany as well. Again, almost 2,000 years ago.
So at some time in the history, they changed our genetics and our skulls changed?
Well, I think what happened was there was a very small population of these people. Maybe they were globally distributed. They could very well have been the remnants of a lost ancient civilization. And as they started to interbreed with normal-looking people, then the natural look of the elongated skull began to disappear. And what resulted was that's when the head binding began in order to try to copy the look. So what I'm hunting for are the natural elongated skulls. And they seem mainly to be in coastal Peru because the sand preserves bone very well. Whereas in other parts of the world, the acidity of the soil breaks bone material down.
That's right. And this picture is amazing. I mean, you look at the skull, you see a totally different human and totally different abilities. Probably sociologically, they had a different, different society with a different mindset.
Yeah, what we're starting to think is that they were not probably, as kings and queens, they probably were not cruel and, as compared to European nobility who tended to be very, self-centered kind of people. These elongated skull people are being seen to be much more beneficial to their societies.
And
they were more caretakers than they were rulers.
And in Bolivia, you found the same thing?
Oh, definitely. Bolivia, actually, a few slides back, I showed an example of one from, or a group of them from Tiwanaku. And actually, if I go back here to that one, that baby was found at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. And you notice the size of the head, as it's almost the same size as the chest.
Wow, that's a giant head, comparison to the chest, like you say, with the giant eyes. This is not,
Yeah,
yeah, this is not
exactly. And
size
this
of
one
our
again,
eyes.
yeah, exactly. The eye sockets are huge.
Well, we would consider that total alien at this time if we see such a being.
Well, you definitely would if you saw someone walking down the street like this.
So
Uh,
we could say the aliens were walking on the earth.
it's suggestive of that, but this slide shows you the way that archaeologists think that the deformation was done. By flattening. It's true. Some cultures flattened the foreheads of children like this, like that. But in order to give the very compound, complex shape of the very ancient skulls, there's no way that these techniques could have been responsible. The skulls are too complex in their design. Especially with the bulging forehead ones. This slide is interesting because this is from the 19th century, and that is a human fetus from the Tiwanaku area that was drawn.
Looks like we're losing signal with Peru, city of Cusco with Brien. Please be patient as we try to connect back. Brien, we have you back. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. This is, of course, in art, we see depictions. This is from the Mayan culture.
We lost the file on. We only see your picture now. Apparently, the file was lost in the. Can you go back to your point PowerPoint?
Sure.
Okay, we got it. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Brien.
Okay, so in the art of different cultures, here, okay, in the art of different cultures, here we have the Maya, here we have the ancient Egyptian, and here we have Tiwanaku in Bolivia.
The Bolivia.
Again, Tiwanaku and other artistic expressions show these ancient people or beings. Again, this is a collection of skulls that was at Tiwanaku.
Looks like the connection comes and goes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Brien Foerster in Peru, and as we coming back to him, hopefully soon. Brien,
Sir.
go ahead. Speak more than showing pictures, because looks like we lose the connection when you show the pictures. Yeah.
Okay.
So tell us more about Bolivia. What's going on in there and what you found?
Well, there's one of the most mysterious places on the planet is a site called Tiwanaku.
Okay.
And Pumapunku is part of that. It's just on the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, presently 7 miles from the lake, but probably thousands of years ago it was on the lake itself. So we believe that Tiwanaku and Pumapunku are thousands of years older than most archaeologists will believe.
Okay.
And we're looking for evidence that that is the case. And truthfully, That's what we're looking for all over the planet.
Hello.
Is we are seeing
Hello.
these megalithic
I'll call you
structures
back.
that
I'm
cannot
on
be
interview.
explained by
I'll call you.
conventional archaeology. So I am bringing engineers, geologists, and other professionals, mainly from the US, but also Europe, to look independently at the megalithic structures and for them to tell me how old they think they are and what kind of technology they believe was involved in constructing them.
How generation after generation they can disappear? Could they be in a pole shift or natural disaster? These generations passed away. What do you think?
Well, definitely. The more that we're looking at it, and the more, again, we're getting input from geologists such as Robert Schoch and other experts, is there's more and more proof that 12,000 years ago, our planet went through an incredible catastrophe, that there was a mass ejection of plasma from the sun, and that caused the melting of the poles very rapidly. Not only did that raise the sea level of our planet up by 350 feet, but it also caused a change in the axis of our Earth. Our Earth probably 12,000 years ago was vertical, and now is at 23.5 degrees off vertical. So that would have caused massive destruction on our planet, not only of the people, but also the megafauna of North America. That's when they died out. And we also believe that what happened was humanity went through 3,000 years of amnesia, of lost time, of lost memory. And that's why these super ancient structures are telling us that they were built long before biblical times.
Interesting. And too much. And amazingly, governments and Vatican and all they destroyed all the evidence or whatever they know about it. They're not talking about it. All the alien technology, all the how did they make holes in the stones like you were showing on your pictures or earlier on Facebook, or how did they by laser, or how did they make those amazing stone curves and stuff?
Well, the thing is that I'm in contact with very cutting, quote unquote, cutting edge engineers in the US, and they're experimenting now with vibrational technology and sonic technology. And so what they believe, some of them, is that in the very distant past, maybe 12,000 years ago, humanity had amazing technology which we presently don't have. And that is what was responsible for the construction, for example, of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Was they didn't have saws or drills. They had vibrational focused technology that allowed them to cut through stone, to basically make stone weightless. They were able to neutralize gravity and move giant blocks and interlock them almost perfectly. And that is what governments and some religious leaders are trying to cover up, is the brilliance of our ancestors.
Interesting you talking about sound technology, because we just invited Dr. Marek Roland. He's got a Polish name. I forgot how to spell it or pronounce it. But he's joining us from Poland on Skype, talking about how sound can be weaponized and used, and different aspects of sound technology. Also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, exactly. And the thing is that engineers such as Christopher Dunn have shown and basically proven that the ancient people didn't have lasers. They had vibrational technology, which is, of a different kind than lasers. But that's mainly what we're researching at this point. And the connection between the ancient technology, the ancient stone structures that would have survived a cataclysmic catastrophe such as the Earth had 12,000 years ago, and the elongated skulled people, the descendants of whom I am studying.
Is Dr. Shock or Chris Don has joined you in any of your expeditions?
Yes, Chris Dunn was with me this last August, and Dr. Shock will be with me and Hugh Newman in 2 weeks.
That's interesting. That makes that makes the whole thing more flavorful. That's interesting. Very good. Very good. So you guys are you guys doing a joint venture interview on any news agency or anything?
Not at this point. What we're going to do is create high-definition documentaries. And I think with Chris Dunn, we'll be doing a yearly tour together in Peru. He and I will also be in Egypt in April with Stephen Mailer, and we're going to do a comparison of the ancient stone technology that we find in Peru with examples that are found in Egypt, and see if we can find evidence of an ancient global culture that some people call the Atlanteans, but that's just a name. We don't necessarily believe in Atlantis as a continent, but an Atlantean race of people who were global is very probable.
You talking about 12,000 years ago?
Yes, and before.
And before, wasn't the Atlantis was more than 25,000 years ago?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I think most people believe that quote-unquote Atlantis disappeared about 12,000 years ago, and that quote-unquote Lemuria or Mu disappeared 25,000 years ago.
Okay. And you believe their survivals moved to South America? Is that what you think?
Yeah, that's what we're starting to presume, because especially up around Cusco and the Sacred Valley area, it's incredibly rich in terms of water and the ability to grow food. Just as in Egypt with the Nile, it has for a long time been an incredibly great place to grow food. So anyone leaving a devastated area, if they had the intelligence and the capability to escape destruction, then they would have gone to strategic places on the planet that had abundant flowing water, rich soil, so that they could grow substantial food for themselves and those that came with them. And from that point, they could rebuild their civilizations, as we see evidence of in Egypt and in the highlands of Peru.
What do you know about Machu Picchu, and what was it used for, and what's your theory on that, on Machu Picchu?
Well, the great thing about Machu Picchu, as an example, but it's also true of many other sacred sites in Peru and, again, in Egypt and other countries, is that the function of the structure would change over time. Religious significance, of course, was very big at Machu Picchu. It was most likely the equivalent of a Camp David. It was a secret place where the general public had no idea that it existed, but it is where the elite would go and communicate with one another. And the thing is that probably 90% of Machu Picchu was constructed by the Inca, but it's that interesting 10%, including the hitching post of the sun, that we're finding evidence that it is several thousand years old.
And you mean older than Inca?
Much older, thousands of years before the Inca.
Wow, that's a big thing. What you just said is a big thing. How you come to that conclusion?
Basically, again, by looking at the stone buildings. The more time that I spent in Peru, the more I can see how the Inca built things. And if we look in the archaeological record, we see the tools they had. They had bronze chisels and stone hammers, much like the pharaonic Egyptians had bronze chisels and stone hammers. So neither the Inca nor the pharaonic Egyptians could have built the megalithic superstructures whereby stone upon stone was stacked together without the use of mortar. So we're looking at the necessity of there having had to have been ancient technologies long, as in thousands of years, prior to the pharaohs and prior to the Inca. And again, we're looking at vibrational technology, which engineers are substantiating.
So, according to what you're saying, the Pyramid of Giza is how old again?
That it really depends. The thing is, Dr. Robert Schoch has proven through geology that the Great Sphinx is at least 7,500 or 8,000 years old. The pharaohs have only been there for 5,000 years. But I think Chris Dunn, the engineer, I think his theory that the Great Pyramid was a power plant. It was an electrical power plant probably 12 or 15,000 years ago is completely logical. And when people enter the Great Pyramid, the reason why they go into an alternate state of consciousness is because the power plant is still functioning at maybe 1% or less of its original power, but it still has this residual vibrational movement.
Pyramid was a time portal, time travel.
And well, that could be as well.
And they used to come and go in the king's chamber, you know. That's my theory. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm not an Egyptologist by any chance. Sure. But have you been to Egypt yourself?
No, not yet. I'm very much looking forward to going in April because I'll be with these great specialists in engineering, and also Stephen Mailer, who's an expert of the oral traditions of ancient Egypt. So together, I think we'll be a great team looking at the ancient structures in a different way, especially much different from the way that Egyptologists have been looking at the structures.
Yeah, they're a bunch of scientists. They look at what their eyes see, but you look at things differently. That's very positive look of a researcher you are.
Well, I think the important thing is that any of this has to be done in a multidisciplinary approach. And so when you're looking at ancient stone buildings, someone who is an archaeologist will have their viewpoint, but they are not an expert in stone construction. For that, you need engineers, you need stonemasons, and you need architects to look at them. You need to have many different scientists of different backgrounds to look and see collectively what they see, not what one person sees, but what many different disciplines see.
The stone on top of the Machu Picchu is not for sacrificial, is it?
No, the whole thing about that the Inca did not sacrifice people. Most of that was made up by the Catholic Church as a way to ridicule the Inca and their descendants and the ancestors.
Oh, okay. Because I sat on it and I was meditating on it, I did not feel that at all, and it was more to me. It was more about astrology than anything else.
Yeah, well, the main thing about Machu Picchu, which makes it kind of special, is that all of the stone there is white granite, and white granite is very high in quartz crystal. So, in fact, the hitching post of the sun, which is also called the Intihuatana, which is the most famous thing at Machu Picchu, it isn't simply one chunk of stone. It's the top of a crystal mountain. So any energy running through that mountain is probably coming out and up through the hitching post of the sun.
Well, the Incas, how do you define Inca society by knowledge and technology and all the social aspects?
Well, the mystery about the Inca is that no one really knows where they came from. conventional story is that they came from Lake Titicaca about the year 1100 AD, but recent linguistic studies are showing or indicating that their language, which is Quechua, actually originated from the coast of Peru. So it's quite possible that Inca or some of the ancient Inca ancestors in fact came from another part of the world across the ocean.
In Gold Museum in Lima, you can see all these different generations before the Incas that they were. I forgot their names. Chimo, you know better than me. I'm sorry. I'm not a researcher like you. Chimo, was that one of the other cultures before them?
Yeah, the Chimu was a great culture on the north coast before the Inca. Also, the Moche were a great culture before the Chimu. The Tiwanaku were prior to the Inca. Peru is wonderful in that it has so many different cultures over time. The Inca were a great culture, but they were simply one of many.
And what's your idea about the Nazca lines?
Well, the Nazca lines are very interesting because you have the actual lines and then you have the animal figures. And anyone who's been to Nazca, you can actually see the Nazca lines if you stand on the ground, but the animal figures you can't see. And I think there's growing evidence that the Nazca lines actually are tracking underground water sources because all of the water on the coast of Peru in general tends to travel underground. We are starting to believe that the Nazca figures are older, probably at least 1,000 years older than the lines themselves, and that they were not created by the Nazca people, but by the previous culture called the Paracas. And the Paracas are the ones with the elongated skulls.
Could it be the Nazca lines could be a reminiscence of a big city? It was there and it had a lot of runways and airports going around the city.
I don't think so, because any sophisticated extraterrestrial culture would not need to have landing strips. If you have a flying saucer or you have, anti-gravitational technology, you do not need any indicators on the ground of where you are. They would have technology far beyond what we could even think of, and therefore to have something simple like a runway would be completely ridiculous. That's where I very much disagree with a lot of the earlier theories about that.
And how about the runway pointing to a direction, and that it looks like a map that they're pointing the flyers to some directions that they should follow.
Well, it is possible that because there are some that are trapezoidal shape, and they could have been indicators to people in the air of pointing to a particular direction. But I think the vast majority of the Nazca lines are simply a way of tracking underground water courses. And they are about 2,000 years old. But because you have culture replacing culture, the oldest aspects of the Nazca area and figures could be many, many thousand years old, made by races of people or beings that have no name.
This is much deeper than they're showing us in museums, or nobody know about what's happened really in this planet before, and Catholic Church has the biggest library hidden from humanity, and Israeli governments are not translating all the Qumran. There's a lot of things going on. They don't want to show us the real history.
Well, that's true, but that's why we're thankful to have things like the megalithic structures in Peru and Egypt and other parts of the world, is that they are still there, and they are telling us through their geometry, through their construction, exactly, I think, who made them, when they were made, and what their function was. So no matter what any government or religious system tries to hide, they can't hide these big buildings. They've been there longer than we could even think about.
Do you believe on December 21st? Where first of all, can I ask you where you're going to be on December 21st?
Probably in Cusco.
Okay, that's a good place to be. And I like Cusco. What's that? The tiger or the shape? Cusco is built in the shape of a tiger.
Actually, a puma.
Puma. What is that signifies to Ma? Not Mayan. I'm sorry. The Incas.
Well, the thing is that you have three animal symbols. You have the serpent, the puma, and the condor. The serpent represents the subconscious mind. The puma represents the conscious mind, and the condor represents the superconscious. So you have the three levels of consciousness depicted in animal form, just like what many other indigenous cultures would do. They would use animal representations to represent different aspects of human consciousness or human behavior.
Is that something you came across, or other people betting on it?
Well, the Inca knew of that at least 500, plus years ago. So the more time I spend in Cusco, the more I get to meet up with the oral tradition keepers of the Inca and learn more from them.
So they're saying Cusco is a subconsciousness. Is that what you're saying?
No, the puma is representational of the conscious mind.
Conscious. Okay. It does seems like out of this planet when you're in Cusco or you're walking in there, the vibrations are different. That's definitely, especially Machu Picchu, is totally different timeline. It's like something happening there. I can't describe it, but it's not like you're in Lima. If you're in Lima, there is no energies like that.
No, there is no energy in Lima.
Yeah.
But I think that's, my theory is that the Inca didn't build Cusco. I think they discovered an abandoned city. And I get a very strong feeling, and I'm starting to find factual evidence that Cusco is probably 12,000 to 15,000 years old, and that the Inca discovered it about almost 1,000 years ago. And the reason why they called it Cusco is because Cusco means the city of stone.
And going back to time travel and Markavazi, is there anything that you want to share with us?
Well, the thing is that there are so many things that look like portals. There are things that look like almost like refrigerator-sized cubes of stone have been removed from sheer walls throughout Cusco and the area, even in and around Lake Titicaca. And some people have theorized that they were, at one time, communication devices whereby you could meditate or focus your energy inside one of these recesses in stone, and by knowing where you were focusing your energy, you could communicate with someone in a similar recess in other parts of Peru and possibly globally.
Have you been in Markavazi yourself?
Yeah, I was there a couple of years ago.
And we hear different stories, and one time I heard there is race of aliens come and go over there, and some of them, they live on the ground.
Yeah, I've heard those stories, and they do actually have mummies up in a little museum on Markawasi of people who were, I think, about 1.8 meters tall, which is a lot larger than the average person living today in the area. No DNA testing has been done as far as I know, though, so I don't think anyone knows who those ancient ancestors were.
Okay. All right. At this time, our time is up, and we hope to get back to you on the conference live. And thank you very much for joining us. And is there any other message you want to send to the audience? Please do. Your website, Yeah, your website, anything else?
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone. My main website is www.hiddenincatours.com, and I've been involved with Native people since I was a child. I know people who are in direct contact with Mayan elders, and the Mayan elders say strongly that nothing negative happens December 21st, that a lot of authors have written bad books about the Maya, which are lies, and that in fact, December 21st, 2012 is the beginning of a new golden age. It's the beginning of a new world and the end of an old world. It's not the end of the world.
Definitely. It's a new calendar and new freedom and consciousness, and for all the enlightened people, and new energies will come in. Definitely. That's a great, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, definitely be waiting for that. So, Brien, once again, thank you very much, and please come back to us at the conference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.